So I'm sitting here with my good friend, Joe Esposito, who we've known each other sort of indirectly over the years through grapevine and common friends, and I've always had a great respect for, but now not only get to work with via MLiQ, but we're neighbors in Puerto Rico. So all the good people are winding up further and further south in the sun, yes?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. I know, Joe, when we first started, I showed you the concept of MLiQ when it was nothing more than wireframes. If I hadn't known how creative you were, I would have never shown this, because you go, what the hell is it? And I remember I wasn't 5 minutes into the discussion looking at it and you go, I'm in. I remember the line, I'm in, right? So thanks for being in. Obviously, you have a huge amount of background with Align Life and chiropractors, but also a huge amount of background with nutrition. And so, we featured you in a lot of the Nourish section in your products and cleanses and things. But quick question to get started, and then we'll just launch from there. The Nourish section, most people think when they open it up, it's just going to be about nutrition. But about 70% of it is about getting rid of all the crap that we put in our bodies, not only every day, but have accumulated in our bodies over the course of a lifetime. Can you comment about that?
Yeah, it's a great topic because we always talk about adding, and we never talk about, eliminating. And sometimes when we start the journey in health, sometimes cleanup is as important as acquisition of new product or nutrients. I look at that just like in business. Sometimes we think, what should we start doing? But we often forget what should we stop doing, right? So it's kind of the same dialogue, more of an organic exchange of good and bad. So no, I think it's a beautiful organic way that you guys are getting people self-aware of the bad as well as introducing the good.
And how would you define the bad? Like, how would you categorize those things?
So there's things that we put into our body that are literally nutrient depleting. And those in the healthcare field watching this, we all know that like white flour is nutrition depleting. So you put in the Wonder Bread in your mouth and you leave that experience with magnesium deficiency because you needed that to process that carb. You leave with a B12 deficiency. You leave with deficiencies caused by metabolizing nutrient depleted food. So you end up creating more damage, not just putting in a toxin in, but you're actually depleting nutrients. And a lot of people aren't really aware of that. Then we add the layer of, are we introducing toxins, pesticides, GMO foods, and these other things that are the next level past the depletion component. And the third level is once you're in a depleted state, your body is more accustomed to absorption of toxins. So when you're calcium deficient, you absorb more lead. A lot of people don't know that. So as we drop nutrients, we open the channel for absorption of toxins. And then it's, we don't know where we're at 5 years, 10 years later when we're on the antidepressants and anti-anxiety and caffeine addictions. We don't know where to go.
I know you've dealt with thousands, maybe tens of thousands of patients, not only in your own practice, but in the docs you work with. How many patients do you think would be aware of what you just talked about?
Honestly, like less than 10%. Even those that are very knowledgeable, they read books on very segmented pieces, but they lose the paradigm, they lose the vision and the concept that you can go through life self-aware of what you're doing. It's very micro niche on a vitamin or a nutrient, but this concept is more empowering people as doctor means teacher, that we can open the door through your app to constantly drip information to create self-awareness, which is where empowerment begins, right?
And do you think most patients are interested in it?
I think this day and age, it's escalating. As insurance reimbursement is dropping, the awareness of people wanting to be empowered in health, it's just this transition that if we don't educate, if we don't provide services like what you're doing with the app, we're going to lose that beautiful transition where people want to be empowered with the right information.
And how would you, I mean, I know this would be really hard to quantify. My dad, who was a chiropractor in 1947, they had patients coming in that weren't drugged out, weren't on 5 or 6 drugs, weren't eating a bunch of crap, that kind of thing. And they saw results, I think, in a much greater way than we see them in chiropractic today. How would you I mean, if you had to sort of qualify versus quantify the impact of people's negative diets on the response they get to chiropractic care, could you?
Yeah, people always say to me, like, you were so passionate nutrition. I was like, no, I'm a chiropractor with a lot of depleted toxic people. So I didn't know what to do but to solve the underlying issue of toxicity and deficiency, but become a nutritionist because I wanted to solve my my patient's concern. So quantifying it, yeah, I think there's so many layers of challenging the innate using medications, and we kind of get lost in solving the underlying cause because there's so many layers of, you know, the medical toxicity. So my vision is if we can treat people in their 30s or their 20s or their teens through education, the chiropractic office, the app that you've developed, these kind of tools, I think we're going to save that 30-year run that we're trying to solve things in the 50s where it's just a lot more work and a lot more challenging.
And if you were, so, you know, if a person walked in and said, okay, I'm yours, just do it to me, what would you have them do first? Would it be, I mean, besides the education, would it be a cleanse? Would it be, you know, obviously they're going to get an adjustment from you and me first.
Yes.
And then what would you do with them next?
I'd make sure they're getting, first thing I do is make sure they're getting water. Dehydration is the area of the brain that understands thirst is the area of the brain that understands hunger. Sometimes there's confusion. Very dehydrated people become sugar junkies. So I'd first handle water and breath, oxygenation and water, and then I do the cleanse. I would start looking at removing heavy sugars and toxins and rebuilding the right type of food. And that would be my baseline. Get water, get oxygen, and then let's start cleaning up and using a cleanse to get the baseline.
And how long is the cleanse typically?
The cleanse we developed is a 10-day cleanse that goes through 5 different cycles of detox. And, you know, a lot of cleanses, what I would call bowel flush. It's laxative and fiber. It moves the bowel, which is awesome. But it's not really helping the liver bind toxins. It's not strengthening the gut wall to prevent toxins from leaking into the bloodstream. So we do a little more comprehensive in a shorter period of time. So intense, but short.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously available through the app and MLiQ for, you know, docs that don't have their own preference. You know, we obviously recommend this strongly. So I get through that. One of the things that intrigued me about what you're doing with docs is 2 things. One is the metabolic testing, but then having it read in group, if you will, by someone. I want you to explain that. And then what's really intriguing to me, and we've made this available or making available through MLiQ, is since we can't take people off drugs, you've come up with a system for a doc to work with people virtually for those patients that want to or need to get off drugs to be able to do it. Talk to me about that.
Excellent. Yeah, we realized that in addition to the subluxation, as you mentioned, from the 40s and 50s to the 90s and the 2000s, people are suffering from metabolic dysfunction, derangement, imbalance. And I couldn't no longer ignore it 10, 15 years ago. It just was in my face because I had the background in metabolic dysfunction. So we decided to add an objective test to the chiropractic experience. You get an x-ray, you get a metabolic test. Those are the 2 things we do. One's looking at alignment and the length of time we've had a subluxation and the length of decay, the depth of decay. And the other one's looking at healing, inflammation, and response time of the body's innate ability to heal. So those are the 2 things we do now. And I tried it over 20 years, and the chiropractor gets nervous on lab because that's not their specialty. Right. So I failed forward fast, many renditions of it, and it just didn't work until I realized, let me bring in functional experts that can read the lab and provide the chiro with the outcome and the information. And that's been a wild success for us. We beta tested 5 clinics, and they are off the chart happy. So that's kind of the metabolic addition of chiro. We don't want to make chiropractors nutritionists or functional medicine people. We want chiropractors to be chiropractors. But we're not foolish in the reality of the current state of society that we got to serve something. We're just going to have somebody else serve it using this new COVID virtual comfort that we have now. Outsource it. So when you get the lab test, your patient goes on an hour report of finding by an expert in metabolic function that edifies the subluxation and the chiropractor while handling the issue at hand and providing the nutrients that they need. So that's kind of the model in that regard.
Yeah, and talk to me about the nurses that you are working with in the early stages of to help chiropractic patients get off drugs if necessary.
Yeah, I bought a chain of hormone balancing clinics that in the medical field, I started implementing functional nutrition instead of just straight medicine and changing the culture of the clinics. I'm really proud of where that's come about. It's called Life Plus MD. And we have nurse practitioners who are now inspired about chiropractors. I go in and adjust them. I teach them the nutrition components. So the shift on this organization is moving towards causative upstream dysfunction. And my dream is to be able to use that team of nurse practitioners in different states to provide your app and your clients the ability for, if their patient had a sore throat, they can get on the app, get a video chat, talk to an MD, and the MD will, or I'm sorry, the nurse practitioner will first understand they want to be natural minded. They understand chiropractic and innate potential, but if it goes past 10, 12 days, they may need a medical intervention, and I want them to have the avenue for that approach without going to a doc that's going to peddle drugs on the first visit and 10 drugs and not appreciate our vision. So I'd like to add that for doctors to have a virtual concierge medicine as a side adjunctive approach if needed.
Yeah, well, like the app, it continues to evolve as people continue to evolve. And I really appreciate what you're doing, not only as a friend, but I appreciate what you're doing professionally. Fantastic stuff. And thanks for the partnership with MLiQ.
Yeah, no, I'm excited. I didn't realize the depth of what you were creating on the wireframe, but I know when we start things out on a strategy, it takes turns and twists based on our learning through the process. So where you've come from where you started, I was impressed when you wireframed it. Now it's coming to life of its own, and I think I think it's really what the chiropractic profession needs to sustain retention, which is not as sexy as attraction, but it's where the juice is to change lives, retention.
Yeah, and that's what the whole deal is about, changing lives. Keep the beach nice and pristine for me until I get back and get out of this sweater, and we'll get some beach in. And thanks, Joe.
Thanks for the time. Appreciate it.